Great. Welcome, everyone. We've got Melinda Kolk here from the University of California. She's going to talk about supporting problem-based learning in remote learning environments. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Melinda.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Melinda, and I am actually more of a consultant, and I work with both K-12 schools and higher education institutions to help them move toward a project-based approach or problem-based approach. Sort of the terms tend to be project-based in K-12, problem-based in higher education. The process is a little bit different in both places, so thanks to those of you who told me where you're from. That way I'm sort of focusing on looking at this from a higher education situation. If you have a moment in the chat window, could you also put your experience, do you already do problem-based learning in your classes? I guess that's my big question, so that I can I don't want to go too fast. I don't want to bore you. But if you have a moment in that chat window to maybe put a, yes, I use PBL, no, I don't. That would just kind of give me a sense of where everybody is for this. I have been training teachers and professors in taking this sort of approach to learning for the past maybe 25 years. So it's been quite a lot of time, and it's been interesting to see sort of a switch in how people approach it. People have been doing project-based learning and problem-based learning for a very, very long time. This isn't new, but I think it's starting to catch on a little bit more, which I find exciting. So let me go here. Can I let it go? There we go. One of the big things I kind of want to always clarify, and I don't know, I think this is usually more of a problem in K-12 institutions than in higher education institutions. Problem-based learning is giving students an issue or a problem as sort of the core of a unit or a course. And then in that process, again, we're going to talk about through the process and how we support that remotely, activating their prior knowledge, doing some research, doing some questioning, ideation, working together to find a solution. In K-12, a lot of people confuse this with projects where I lecture on a lot of stuff and then students write a paper or complete a project or build something. And again, while there is some overlap in theories and other things, it is sort of a very different approach. And it's really that, I think I go back to that constructivist form of learning. It really doesn't matter. Well, it does, obviously it does matter. As an instructor, it matters less what comes out of my mouth, and what really only matters is what sticks in my students' heads. And really, if we're going forth and hoping to have them develop solid understanding of concepts in science, health, medicine, etc., engineering, having a chance to really work through misconceptions through creation is essential. So I know that how it looks in, again, health versus science versus engineering versus language arts versus math is a little bit different, but all projects follow a similar process as we employ them in our classrooms, or we get students through that process. So we're going to sort of kick it off by sharing what this problem is, establishing our expectations, then students sort of initiate their work with this. And part of this, again, I don't have a continuum up here, because this is constructivist and student-centered, all of our efforts sort of need to be thrusting as much of this process onto our students as we can. So when they're doing that inquiry, I think it's the best part, because all of a sudden students understand your professor becomes your best advocate within the class. And because they're sort of this expert thinker, and that's what we want them to feel and learn is that as I build these expertise and grow in that, we want to start creating collegial sort of associations between our students and our professors, because we want to elevate that student thinking and that student learning. So they're going to ideate, they do their ideation and visioning, they create a plan, they're working in small groups, and we're assigning tasks, and then they have to work together to craft a solution. There's a presentation of that, and there's a reflection piece of that. So I want to kind of talk about supporting this in remote environments by going through each of those individual parts of the process and sort of talking about tools and things that we can do for this. As we kick it off, one of the things I love about technology is, number one, our students are digital. And I mean, this is the worst. I mean, it's getting to the point, we're almost to the point where this is the worst technology our students in college have ever seen. And so taking advantage of our digital tools, and that's sort of the fun part. Remote is much harder. And to do any sort of problem-based learning in a remote environment is much, much more difficult than it is face-to-face. But technology makes that easier. And again, technology can, again, help us level that playing field and sort of break down barriers between that sage on the stage and to that, moving to that guide on the side. And one of the things we can use technology for is to really hook them in the beginning with this. And a part of that is by experiencing something that sets a situation or a scenario or a problem, as opposed to reading through it or something that I provide to them in printed form, is it again changes that dynamic from everything important in this classroom is coming out of my mouth and you don't need to do any thinking, as opposed to, here's the situation, now tell me what you think about it. What are your feelings about this? And we're sort of trying to hook students in that, and sort of, in traditional fashion, we are using readings, we're using videos, we're using photographs, experiences, simulations, experts coming in. All of that is sort of, I think, can be easily facilitated with VR goggles if we want to have experiences. They're already used to using ebooks and supports for a lot of their classes and the way that they read. So, sort of after we hook them or set up the tone or give them the example of what we're looking at, is we need to be very clear about defining our criteria for excellence. And that's sort of, again, establishing that piece in the room where, even if we're remote, I am sort of the expert in this and I have a set of expectations and goals, and making those clear, as well as making sort of the possibilities as clear as possible without giving away answers. It again helps me give them a picture that they can use when I'm not there. So, we can always check in on our office hours. We can do Zoom calls. If we're face to face, this isn't quite so hard. But having that assessment piece. How will this be graded? How many points? What is the expectation for number of pages? Or how much time are you supposed to spend on each of these different sets? And all of that is also outlined in our syllabus. Because just because we're thrusting all of this on students, we can still timeline it, because this process is a process that is somewhat universal for how we're supposed to solve problems and get students through this, or how we are going to deploy problem-based learning in the classroom. In this initial piece, also, one of the key pieces about problem-based learning and project-based learning in K-12 is that students are working in collaborative teams. So we have to work on making sure students are very clear on what our expectations are for how they will perform together. But again, maybe we might give them roles again. Again, that's maybe more of a K-12 thing. What sort of tools do they have to connect with each other? Again, if they are remote, how am I going to be able to facilitate their connecting with each other? Is there we have this wonderful Discord sort of back channel that I hope if you're getting some experience with that, this is a great tool to kind of run for courses, have a back channel for the whole course where you can have all of these different hashtags for each group to talk to each other, or check in with a professor, or check in with an expert, or find additional readings or resources. So we're really, again, making sure that our students know what tools are available to be able to make this all happen. And again, a lot of that we should have links in our syllabus for what those resources are, or if there is anything that they have to purchase subscription wise, to be able to be clear on monetary expectations ahead of time as well. That working in teams is essential to this, so we're going to the final, again, it's sort of, again, like we're grading a group project. There is also a piece at the end. Can I go back to, I don't think, anyway, go back to that there's reflection and self-assessment. That will be work individually. And there is also lots of other individual work that we can collect if you are concerned. I know a lot of places with grades, group grades are always not necessarily the most fun to deal with difficult students or when expectations are of quality can range. That's where, again, that having that assessment piece is so essential. What we want to do once we kind of again, we kick off it with a situation or scenario or an experience, and we present students with the problem that they have, rather than giving them everything they need to know in order to solve this or work through this. The idea is, again, we're putting it back on students to construct their knowledge and just simply talking about what do they already know on this topic. And this, again, is where a collaborative piece is essential. So this is also a cultural thing, especially if we're doing this over a Zoom or an online location. How am I sharing what I know and my personal experience to be able to build on my classmates' experience as well, and sort of do that sort of riffing off of ideas and expanding our ideas that way. We need to be able to collect that in a common place. That can be sort of that, think of that as the instructor's job, is we are the ones working to facilitate, even if the students are doing the work and they're putting it in, creating, even if it's a shared Google Doc, a Google spreadsheet, or something simple like that, where students can put their prior knowledge or we can reorganize it. Because what I also have to do now is make sure that if I hear, so we're having lots of, again, verbal discussions at the same time. So the more, again, this is a cultural thing, the more I can get my kids to talk on video, the more I can get them to comment on blogs or questions in a public forum, the more that it is, or the easier it is for me to find those misconceptions, and then also, again, share additional resources and or reading. So it's not, again, this is just, it's really a subtle shift, because you're still going to know what sort of resources you would want students to read if we were teaching this in a traditional manner of cover. But those kinds of things here are some things that I would suggest that you read if you're struggling with this, or if you can't answer this. And we can include links in all of those things. It's just that rather than building all of that obvious stuff into a syllabus, we are building it in as students are identifying things, and as we are sort of cultivating and creating those shared documents and that shared construct of our learning in a document. So I'm putting resources in after students share ideas or knowledge, or after they make connections. Again, because I'm sort of this expert in the room to be able to get them to where they need to go without telling them. And that's, I think, the big reason people go to problem-based learning and project-based learning instead, is it's been obvious, and especially if you're in K-12, or even when we get into higher ed, you get students in your class like they really should have known this already. Well, yeah, because just because it comes out of my mouth, a teacher probably covered it. But PBL is really about uncovering that information. And so, we're really working on that student piece of it. So again, not necessarily that front loading, but finding those pieces that we can, there are those places where students need extra help or want to extend. But again, this is sort of the fun part, and I remember this in some of my college courses that were problem-based, is I would ask a professor a question and get an entirely new set of reading resources. And that time it was all pretty much text-based, but that were highly interesting, and then connected to a personal interest or a passion for me that led me to go way deeper into a course, even if it was a survey course, than I would have in the initial sort of time period. And that's, again, that sort of engagement and motivating piece. You get a lot of buy-in with this, because we're responding as instructors to where students are, and we're trying to get them to use where they are and build on what they are, or do the work and reading because they have asked, I need to know this. Okay, you identified this need to know. Here's a resource that can help you with that. And then we, again, we can progress from there. As we have a problem, in addition to sort of sharing what I know about something, I should start asking a whole lot of questions. And that's also where that initial, there's wonderful wording about creating ill-structured problems. In general, the problem, you don't know enough So you have a lot more questions. Well, who needs this? Well, when do they need it? Is there a dollar limitation? How long have they had this? What comorbidity factors does this person have? Or all the, again, starting to ask more and more questions, because I start to identify audience for the problem. I start to make connections to, again, we're broadening sort of our scope. So we're not just memorizing content and sending it back. We're utilizing that content, and we're expanding the content we need to sort of draw in. And that's, again, that sort of activate that prior knowledge idea. I know this much, but I'm starting to figure out what don't I know, and I use those questions for that. And again, I might be using this to look at obstacles. I would use these to prompt initial research. This would also be a time, and again, this is where problem-based, we're not throwing away our sort of traditional stuff. We don't throw away lectures, because at some point, if we decide everybody has a misconception on something, I'm just going to say, you know what? I think we need to take, 20 minutes, and I'm going to cover this and go through it as fast as whatever, because that's the best part about lectures is we've done all the work to make it easy to transfer information. So it may be, instead of providing a reading, I do a lecture on this based on the questions that you have. Again, that's a choice. What you choose to do or don't do is really, I want to kind of say that is, there's not this perfect right way to do this, because I don't know your students in the classroom, and I don't know your passions and your goals for the class. So it's sort of a give and take all the time. But I kind of want to try to digress a little bit, refer back to that. We are always working towards students constructing knowledge. So every time I try to give them knowledge, it's not the same thing. So I have to be a little careful about that. But there's a lot of times, again, where this is highly effective. In order to get them to proceed, I may need to ask them to write a paper on a specific topic so that I can verify or do a sort of a formative assessment. I can still give it a score or grade. That on something that lets me know that they have comprehension on this topic, and they have enough awareness, and they have a solid foundation of information in order to be able to move forward. Some things that are maybe a little non-traditional that we could do with our students are, there's an empathy map on the side. If we are working with a patient, if we are working with someone who needs something designed, somebody who needs to, I don't know, struggling with depression or alcoholism or something along those lines, getting a better sense of sort of like a case study. Who am I doing this for, and what is really happening for this person? The other one I love is the 5 whys, and this comes from Toyota. And that is really trying to determine the root of a problem. Someone is showing signs of these symptoms, etc. Okay, well, why are they showing that? Well, we think they have pneumonia. Okay, well, why did they get pneumonia? Okay, maybe they're not getting enough sleep. Maybe they have a comorbid. Like I said, we're drilling down to keep asking why, so we get further and further and further. And this is, again, another way to help students build on information or determine the information that they need to know or learn. If we are giving them a problem to solve, coyotes taking over habitat of other animals, or invasive species, there's so many fun things that we can do with this, is we want them to also sort of produce ideas in the same way. And this is, I think, coming from, I own a small business, I'm a consultant, and that really, I want employees who have the ability to give me a whole lot of new ideas. And that's sort of the other, again, I think the benefit or reason so many people are attracted to problem-based and project-based learning is it provides our learners with skills that apply in a lot of different places. And it's those, I don't know if anybody has heard those, the 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. And this is sort of that creativity piece, is I need to be able to come up with I don't want to tell you what you need to do. I need you to tell me what you need to do, and what you need to do it, and how you might do it. And then I want you to ask me questions about how I can help you do it better. And so as we ideate, we're looking at trying to get students to kind of move away from that analysis. And this is the hard part too in education, is our students know that in general in education, there is a right answer. So they don't want to throw out a crazy answer or sometimes even verbalize a misconception, which is why it leads to them constantly not understanding, is we're not looking for a right answer here. And so a really great problem has multiple answers or multiple correct answers or multiple approaches, great possible solutions, designs, architecture, against reports of ways that I can showcase this information or solve this issue. So we're really looking at getting quantity here. This is a time which is a difficult, but I think a good time to engage our students who maybe are a little, what you might call a little more flighty, less logical, because this is the ideas time that we want as many ideas as possible. And this is also that collaboration piece, is getting our non-creative students to break out of that mode a little bit, as well as appreciate someone on their team who maybe isn't as logical or isn't as straightforward thinking, et cetera. And then, because part of when we're working collaboratively in this problem is that's also that sort of the point of problem-based learning is to produce the learners and the students and the career, the human beings that we want to take care of us in their future and solve the hard problems that we're all facing with climate change and cancer and civic unrest and war and, and invasions and other things there. So again, getting them to work, and I love the part I love about this process is it's sort of, there are parts of it that are highly logical, and parts of it, especially when we're looking at assessment, we're finding solutions, we're testing hypotheses, we're iterating as we go through that. But then there are also times where it's sort of starting to expand and grow, and we need different thinkers for that. And so this is a great time to, again, offer our students or help our students understand that how to pull that out of people, out of their team, how to value that in their team and get the most from that. Because that's the whole point of, again, working collaboratively, is I can do better stuff than I can by myself. And so I think if we're looking at doing problems or projects in the classroom and we think individuals could do this, our problems aren't sufficiently hard, aren't sufficiently difficult, or are too narrow. So trying to expand that so they really take a challenge to be able to do that. Now, as students come up with these ideas, and we're hopeful there already should be in a team here, is that their team needs to then know, because I know we have way too much. And this is also, I think, then that life skill that we're looking to build in addition to deeper content learning, is we want, how do we solve a problem? We have to have lots of solutions, but we have to then analyze which solutions are best and throw some out. We have to narrow it down. We have to be able to take a big problem and break it into its component pieces. And so we're going to rely on the students. I'm not going to tell them what to do their solution on, or what to write a paper on, or what to build their project around. They're supposed to do this. And again, this is, again, that piece of building that analytical thinking piece, where they are having conversations with each other. They are referring back to their research. They are looking at collecting data. They are revisiting stuff. They are redoing things. And they're starting to narrow down and say, hey, I think this is where we're headed. And this is the tough part too, is as we solve problems, this is an iterative cycle. So making sure that as instructors, we always sort of allow for a possibility to say, we went here and it didn't work. Can we change it? And we want to put as many of those in as possible, because if I go at, this is one problem for an entire semester, what I don't want them to do is hit that 4 weeks before the semester's ending. I want them to start to say, hey, maybe this isn't right. Let's go back earlier in the system. So we're creating also these check-in points. And if we're working remotely, this is also where it gets really hard. So as they ideate, we need to have a document that I could see, a Google Doc, an inspiration document, a Bubble US. I think I'll show that next. So we're sort of taking here's an example. Let me see if I can copy that. Actually, I'll just type it in here. I'm pretty sure this is the address. Oops, bubble.us. This is just a mind mapping tool. And you don't need to have an account. You can create an account, but you can just start doing one, although that's only great for sort of one session if you can screen capture it. But this is an example of This actually was coming out of a K-12 site where a neighbor had an injury and wasn't able to stay in his home, and students were working on solutions for this family. And you can sort of see rent out the house for income so that he could move to a new house. Does he go into a location for assistance? Do we make modifications to the existing house because he can no longer, stand up straight, reach these sort of things? And so students sort of came up with lots of different ideas and then organize them. So again, you could sort of see that big brainstorm with all these different ideas, and then we're sort of starting to group them together into different different areas. And then students, in this case, rather than the teams forming ahead of time, the teams formed here so that they could do their work based on their interest in solving this particular problem. So and this is sort of one of the other groups or one of the other pods in this particular school did, I think, science, physics. It was a physical science class. They looked at modifications to the house. Another one was the humanities, looked at social issues and family issues related to assistance. And then somebody else looked at in math class, they looked at the specific economics. So we're, again, using a digital tool like this allows me to have a check-in point. And again, this is especially when we're working in these remote things, to continue going through so that we have these constant things so that I can, again, I'm not checking off that which is really hard too. I say as an instructional leader, it's much easier to say, oh, I did that presentation, done. Now what's my next presentation? Done. This is much, much more, I think, mental work and flexibility and flexible thinking and drawing on your experience, which I find much more rewarding as an instructor because it's much more interesting. It's a lot harder to feel confident in preparations. But again, that we're sort of, again, riffing off what's happening. I also going to ask my student teams to go a step further from sort of, here's our vision, to specifically, you have a group. Tell me what it is your group plans to do, how you think you're going to get there. And then let's also work on looking at maybe, and again, we don't have to quite get always this elaborate, but maybe using something like a Gantt chart. And by Gantt chart, what it does is it shows the names of the people who are doing specific pieces of work and when that progress will be met, or what that task is and when that progress will be complete. The one that I have here is, if I click that, let me just see if I can go here. I'll just put this link in here if anybody's interested in a Gantt chart. I think it's maybe a little more appropriate for business or project software development and those kinds of things. Let me go back here. But I put that link in the chat window. Is this a Google? You could just look up Gantt chart for Excel or other things, but a storyboard, an outline. Who's on the team, who is working on what piece of research, who did some of the work. Again, because this is students. In general, students hate, especially if they haven't done a lot of project work before, they do not like it because it's very hard to get it. That's one of the things we've never done in school. Here's the expectations. I go right there. My teacher tells me to do this. I do this. Well, now I sort of don't have this clear expectation, and I have a lot of people I have to get there and I have to rely on because there's no way I can do all the work. And so really getting them to spell this out is helpful for them. It's also, again, helpful. Something like a Gantt chart or a progress chart is helpful for you to sort of monitor that. And I don't know if anybody's working with K-12 institutions. I have a friend in 3rd grade, and each of her teams makes a race car, and she has a kind of a road all the way across the wall of her classroom that says, we conducted our initial research. We have our questions we did our questions, and we have our research. Now we have our ideas, and we started working on our plan, and then you move the car so that when you walk in, it's immediately obvious where people are. A Gantt chart will be able to show you that too, because it'll show work completed, and you can sort of monitor progress that way. Again, it's not your job, but if we're doing PBL really well, it's not our job to monitor the progress. It's the job of our students to be able to do that monitoring and demonstrate to us where they are. So again, they have to narrow it down. They have to show how they're going to go through all of that. And then there's a sort of a long section of time. And I think this is the most difficult part of doing this sort of work in the classroom. Is it's not like this we're going to spend a week here and a week here, but then there's like sometimes it's 6 weeks of time that you have, to do this, crafting the solution. And it's coming up with, at that point, I think this, for you, what are the check-in points that you can do to have them work, especially if they're working remotely. We also, I mentioned that, I think I missed that with the teams, is what sort of tools do they have to work together? How do I foster this? This is where trying to do collaborative problem solving in a remote environment becomes much more difficult for the students. I know a lot of students who were not in traditional classrooms really struggled during COVID because of that, because we're not used to being able to do this. That being said, my daughter goes to a project-based middle school right now, and they have high schools as well, but she would be comfortable with that. She knows how to reach out to people using Google Docs. She knows they have a timeline, they have progress charts, they have text threads that they use on their phones. So how do they monitor all of that? And again, but getting students to come up with a solution, and again, back to your expectations, what does that solution need to look like? Can it involve a rough draft? That's a wonderful, again, we have to continually make, as instructors, these check-in points, especially if they're remote. Those become more and more essential to ensure that my students are going to make it through my course successfully by the end. This is another time where I could take, going back and addressing those misconceptions. That's I think the wonderful part about PBL was the balance of, we're not front loading with this, but at the same time, what we hope doesn't happen is the students looking at this going, well, this was information that would have been helpful yesterday or last week as we were doing this. And that's, like I said, is the wonderful part about doing problem-based learning is, even if you've done the same course, the same project several times, it's always different because the learners in the classroom are different. And that's, again, what's so helpful to get them to have that deep understanding is, I can't teach it the way I want to. I have to teach it the way they're going to learn, and in a process that their minds are going to be able to absorb this. But this is also the time where you may notice some teams are way ahead of other teams. Now we can, very fun, or more exciting for me, is I can take them off in a tangent. We can have more in-depth discussions with that. Maybe if this is over the course of several weeks, I have digital assignments, but also then check-ins with individual teams at different times. And sometimes we can schedule those. Again, I can take control of that and I can schedule that out. But most of the time I find, if I say, okay, over the next couple of weeks, these are the times that I have office hours or open times for this particular class to talk to your groups. I expect to talk to all of your groups. You sign up. And usually they sign up based on the time, because, well, we're not ready to sign up. Okay, well, then they're just going to go later. It makes sense. So again, giving them some of that control and responsibility back. In general, higher education, I don't think we have to worry as much about conflict resolution, although I remember plenty of times in group projects in my college experience that were not so great, with certain individuals not doing their fair share of the work, or taking things in directions, or overtaking the group. But in K-12, there tends to be quite a bit of conflict resolution, especially if we are introducing it for the first time with students who don't have experience, who don't just know how to turn and talk, who don't know how to draw someone without the group, who go immediately turn around and come to the instructor and say, so-and-so is not doing their work. And instead of, they haven't been told, well, what are you going to do to fix that? And again, we're constantly changing it back and sending it back to students. As we progress through this time, constant exit tickets, excuse me, I don't think we use these so much in higher education courses as we do in K-12, but there's still a great sort of solution. Is it can be a Google form. Every week at the end of the week, or after the end of every class period, or you've got two classes a week, at the end of the second one, the group goes in and says what their progress is. So if we're not doing the Gantt charts or getting all crazy with that, at least we know what has happened with the team during the course of that time, and sort of, again, letting them work with us to ask the questions, or create something that is going to foster a discussion, or a reason for them to reach out. Or a reason for us to reach out and ask appropriate questions, or better questions that are going to get us the answers and the solutions we need and they need. Really, again, digital tools are such a powerful thing for this, and it's so easy. Non-shared documents are really almost a thing of the past, and that's the fun part. Collaborative databases, even videos can be made together. Art things can be, most things now are, we think about, making an image for whatever. Canva has a way to bring a whole team on that, because we're starting to see the power of multiple perspectives and multiple experiences, and really working on what sort of tools are you providing your students to be able to not only communicate, monitor progress, conduct research, record research, what are they doing to produce it in a digital form as well? I even mentioned it, an online database kind of a thing. Are we building our own database? Are we coding our own stuff? Because that is what's needed. Or are we simply building a structure? My nephew's in an engineering program and he's building a car right now, and they're building a car. So, there's, it doesn't just have to be digital, but trust me, his position on the car is actually creating the head motherboard that sort of runs everything. So, there is still digital in all of this, but again, don't feel like we have to limit ourselves to that. However, if we are building a car, one of the struggles they really had was they couldn't get together in the same room because of COVID. And so they're sort of in this progress, and thank goodness it's for them, it's a couple years. They sort of delayed a lot of stuff and designed a lot of stuff, and then spent, when they could get back together, spent a lot of time doing stuff that they had already designed. So the sequence was just out of order. And I think that's, again, one of the things COVID has taught us is that everything has to be rethought in this new sort of situation. But I think PBL is really good about that too, because it provides so many opportunities for us to watch, because this is the other part I think that makes it maybe a little more difficult to pull off in the classroom, is I'm going to have different groups, and they're going to be looking maybe at vastly different ideas, but they may also be at different parts of the process at the same time, which is incredibly hard to evaluate and or monitor. But it's also, again, honors that team is where, hopefully, is where that team needs to be to design things. And I have found this in the past, that I will have, people who are stuck, they seem to be stuck in the planning stages forever, and other teams have just kind of moved on, but by the end it all evens out because they had a better plan, so it took less time to execute, whereas another team didn't have either a strong enough plan, or started working and decided they had to change their plan. So again, the teams tend to, like I said, honor our students and sort of trust a little bit that this is going to work with them. Although, again, if they are totally new to this process, we're going to need to kind of scale back on all of this. And I hope that you feel that way as we're talking about this, is how much structure you give, how much control you have on that continuum is completely dependent on what's happening with your students. And again, I don't know that. You may decide that, okay, wait a minute, I can't let them run off and do this. I can't let them make this decision. They're not ready for that. Or I need to narrow it down a little bit this way. And again, that's perfectly acceptable, because no one knows better how to get or where you want to go and how those kids are going to get there than you. You're the master learner in that room. The other piece of this is the part that really needs to be done, is that shared time to discuss what happened or what our solution is, and making students a part of maybe the feedback process. So we're not just getting all to the end, and this is the first time some teams have heard anything from another team. That's not the benefit of groupthink. And so again, if a lot of this stuff is living in this digital space, like Discord, or even a threaded blog, or a wiki kind of a page, we've hopefully grown from those cross-pollinations and discussions that students have had with each other. But doing a formal sort of, part of it is this is a lot of work on student parts. It's a lot of risk taking on that. It's usually a lot of effort and skills that they have not done before, because it goes way beyond memorizing content or applying content in a structure that is familiar. So again, without sort of having obvious expectations or obvious to-dos, there's not necessarily a nice checklist for a lot of these things. So that final presentation is often a celebration, but it's again off that time to cross-pollinate with that. It can be, again, a sort of Performance as well. Let's not, I don't want to limit, it's kind of hard to talk K to 12 and then higher ed too, is how this all looks. It's very, very different, or what students are capable of producing and what you have time to produce and what you're expected to produce within your discipline. So we want to share that all, and a lot of that, again, I guess that is just a celebration, but we also don't learn from just doing stuff. We learn from when we think about what happened. And so in addition to sharing it with others and learning from what happened with them, there does need to be a part of the process where individuals and the whole team is reflecting on what happened. This may be, if I think sometimes I find this is, so we kind of finish the case study or the problem, and we're maybe 3/4 of the way through our unit or 4/5 of the way through the course or this topic. And then we're looking at the self-assessment piece, because it is, where did this break down? Where did my thinking break down? Where did my research go wrong? Where did I ask the wrong questions? Where should I have redeployed my team? When didn't I think about my audience, etc.? And taking a moment to have a time where, once again, the team, instead of, so when I present to my peers or a class or an authentic audience, that is a chance to re-clarify my understanding, again, share some of that group think, or build some of that group capacity. But when I do that reflection piece, it's between me and my instructor, and we are really looking at that metacognitive reflective process to look at not the product that they made, but the process that they used to get there, to ensure that my learners are working on their prior knowledge, know how to access prior knowledge, know how to compensate for lack of experience, know how to ask the right questions to get to the research, know how to conduct quality research, know how to, cite their research, etc. Going through all of those individual pieces. And putting Google Forms for self-assessment is another one to have there. Getting additional feedback from within the group or the larger group, or maybe in this case, responding to feedback that happened in that larger sharing of information. And again, I'm looking at talking about and highlighting things, points where I see growth. And I think this is the other part that I love about project-based learning, is it helps me as an instructor. And this, again, is your belief in how learning happens, is so much of our education system is an achievement. And so did you achieve this? But in project-based learning, we're really looking at growth, and we're hoping to take the time to have students grow in a myriad of ways, or look at their growth in each of those individual areas, so that we can provide them with a better assessment to help them do a better job of learning in the future on their own. So I think digital stuff really helps for all of this. PBL, the PBL project or problem-based, digital is everything now, and especially when we're working remote, it does not. There are still benefits to doing stuff face to face, but having watched projects in action where students are meeting over Zoom and they're calling each other out, and turn your video back on, look at my face when you do that, I can't tell how you're feeling, let's go on a video call, or let's change this, or well, you said this, but that wasn't very clear. What we want to do is, like I said, we're growing in a lot of different ways, and this is tough right now. But I think we can utilize that remote environment, provides us a level of skills that are highly useful for our future. I know I'm in an office building here, and I know the company that I'm also part of, when we closed down 1 or 2 years ago, everybody shut their laptops and just started working from home. And I don't think we'll ever come back to the office. We come in to meet in small portions, but there's also times where there's constant Zoom calls, there's constant messaging back and forth all day. And again, there's also lots of phone calls. Almost everything is a shared document in a way that it wasn't a shared document before. So I think that because we're not face-to-face, we're doing a much better job of taking advantage of skills and experiences in ways that we didn't before, because I could have just asked somebody, but I often never did. And so, like I said, it's building in these protocols to help me do a better job and really become a better learner and understand, have a deeper appreciation of the content, a deeper connection to it, being better able to apply it, and again, break down those problems. Let me go back to end on I want to show I can't get my mouse to work. There we go. Whoops, no, it's not going to work. Let me show that process so that that is on screen as we are talking. There we go. And if anybody has any questions, I'll kind of leave the end of this for questions. If anybody has any questions specifically, I shared this in the back channel, so you can do that. Actually, I think I put it in. Let me actually do this. Let me put the URL in our chat window as well. And that way you can just look at it here and you don't have to go find it in the back channel. That's the slide presentation. I don't know if that's helpful to anyone. I did not put my email address on the top. And but if anybody has any questions, feel free to jump on the chat window. You can address them to me directly. You may also, you're welcome to leave if you've gotten what you need out of this one. And if you want to jump on your microphone, feel free to jump on mic and or video camera and join us. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you all.
Any other questions for Melinda? Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and we can hang out
Thank
here
you
for
so much.
a couple minutes.